Eighth grade Bobcats, Mr. Flato here. Welcome back to another snowy week, it looks like, here at the Helena Middle School. On this week's B.O.B Lesson, we're going to dive into academics a little bit. As promised, got another new lesson for you this week. I also know you're tired for the third year in a row of hearing me preach. And so I walked over to the high school and incorporated Mr. Mergel, who is a softball coach, a basketball coach, a golf coach, and a school counselor at Helena High into the mix. He's been working as a school counselor far longer than I have. He's been in education far longer than I have. And so I had some important questions to ask him geared around the importance of 8th grade academics and what he sees moving into high school, where kids struggle, where kids flourish, and what you can do now. So let's get rock and rolling on that. Hope you guys have a great week. Make it a great week at the Helena Middle School. This week's B.O.B lesson is titled The Importance of 8th Grade Academics. But first, let's be our best this week at HMS. Let's be Bob. Let's be safe. Let's be responsible. Let's be respectful. Let's be a learner. Hello, HMS Bobcats. Welcome back for another week. On this week's B.O.B lesson, as promised, I'm bringing you something new today, and I have a very special guest with me. I'd like to introduce you guys to Mr. Mergel. Mr. Mergel is a high school counselor at Helena High. Thanks for being here, Mr. Mergel. How many years in education do you have now?
This is my 19th year.
19th year in education, and most 15 of those as a counselor?
9, actually.
9, okay.
Yeah, this is my 9th year.
So I know you were a classroom teacher before. You may also recognize Mr. Mergel as a golf coach at Helena High, as a boys basketball coach, and also as a softball coach. So when you guys get to Helena High, you're going to see Mr. Mergel all over the place, as well as being a counselor. So one of the things I wanted to do was, instead of me preaching to you guys about the importance of 8th grade academics, I wanted to bring in a high school counselor so I can get his perspective on some of the things that he sees. So I have about 6 questions for you, if that
Perfect.
works today.
Okay.
I guess starting off, the first one would be, what to you is the most important thing for 8th grade students to know about taking responsibility for their own academic preparation for their freshman year of high school, which is going to be coming up here like 11 months quicker than they realize?
I would say one thing that you guys need to understand and realize is that once you get to high school, you have a little bit more independence. Mm-hmm. So with that becomes more responsibility. So you're not always going to have someone there necessarily holding your hand, on a day-to-day basis. In some cases, where, you're going to have somebody always harping on you about, hey, you need to get your homework done for this class. You need to get your homework done for this class. Because I think you guys have advisory period where somebody's always there kind of checking on kids, in which we don't have that necessarily other than our nutrition break period. So the one thing I would advise you is, like I said, is with more independence comes more responsibility. We want you to start to learn to become young adults, so taking some more advocation skills and advocating for yourself and seeking out help when you need help.
Awesome. So that process, we're wanting to begin that process right now. It's funny, you stole the words right out of my mouth. I was going to do a B.O.B lesson coming up on, with more freedoms comes more responsibility. So it's awesome that you say that. Next question. What is the biggest thing most freshmen that you see struggle with academically? And maybe more importantly, what can our 8th graders do now to prepare to meet and exceed those challenges next year?
One thing I would say, Bobcats, that you should start to work on now is the fact that you should start working on some time management skills. From a classroom teacher to now as a counselor, when I was in the classroom for 10 years, what I saw more kids struggle with than anything is homework completion. And homework does matter at the high school level. And it's one of the biggest things that I saw students, one of the reasons why students failed more than anything. It wasn't because they failed tests and quizzes, it was because they failed to turn in homework, which is that practice for tests and quizzes. So it's very, very important that you put an emphasis on homework and then finding that time management piece to carve out in your day.
Sure. So much of it is 3 components. Show up to school every day.
Correct.
Turn in your schoolwork.
Correct.
And then just be Bob. Be respectful, be responsible, be safe, be a learner. Awesome.
Yeah.
Next question. What would you say to 8th graders who don't think 8th grade academics matter and are looking to take a year off? Sometimes that's something I hear from 8th graders, like, I'm tired, I'm taking this year off, I'm going to get back after it when I'm a freshman. What would you say to maybe an 8th grader that is starting to take on that thought process?
Well, it's one of those things, like I always tell kids, I'll use an example of an academic curricular area. So kids obviously sometimes will say their senior year, for example, they're going to say, I'm not going to take math this year. I'm taking a year out from math. Well, math is one of those things, if you don't use it, you lose it. And I think it's the same kind of thing in any kind of academics. If you're going to take your 8th grade year off, you're going to lose all those good study habits. and then you're going to have to break into those study habits again the following year as a freshman. So everything is a building block upon itself. So when it comes time for your math class, your English class, you're learning all those necessary skills that are going to be helpful for you once you get to high school.
Fantastic. What is something that most high school students know now that they didn't know in eighth grade, but they wish they knew in eighth grade? Maybe you've got some juniors, seniors, even sophomores, freshmen coming in. They're like, Mr. Mergel, I wish I would have known this in eighth grade. I know this now. I wish I would have known that in eighth grade.
I asked a couple of students actually in the hallways
Awesome.
the last couple days about this question, and I came up with a couple different answers. But the one recurring theme actually is high school's not that scary. So a lot of them said that they had a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress about going to high school, but as they found their way and navigated through the hallways and found out their resources, they said it's not as bad as they thought. But the other one is they said, I always wish I had listened to my teachers and the counselors that came over from the high school about the importance of completing their homework, showing up on a daily basis, that attendance is very important, you know, doing what you're supposed to do in the classroom, and obviously, like you said, those B.O.B universals is very important, which we have our MBI universals here, too, at Helena High. So.
Fantastic. I know there's a certain segment of our kids out there that are starting to think about what they want to do for a career. Maybe they have some college aspirations, whether that's a traditional four-year college university or a two-year college like Helena College, which has some really great programs going on these days. But they don't think that maybe their family is in a position to afford college, or their family isn't in a position to support, or maybe they feel like they got to get a job right out of high school. What would you say to some of those kids right now about that, as maybe that would be something they would learn maybe towards their junior or senior year, that maybe you could tell them right now?
There's an abundance of resources. I would never want a kid to feel like they don't have the opportunity to go on to a post-secondary education. Our career counselor, Nancy Oliveira, does a wonderful job of helping our students navigate those resources. As a matter of fact, every Monday she puts together an updated scholarship list that is just outside of my door here. It's also on our Helena High Counseling webpage. Even if as students start to think about that process, you can look at the number of different scholarships that she has on there now that are there, you know, and then with financial aid and the FAFSA completion, which is the free application for student aid, there's a lot of opportunities for grants for students to earn, which is money you don't have to pay back. So there are an abundance of student loans and different opportunities that can get. So I would not want that to hinder a student's opportunity from going to a post-secondary education. Whether you said like it's a traditional four-year school, a two-year school, an apprenticeship, a certification programs. There's so many different options out there for students so that they can be successful.
Yeah. And some of our students have actually started that process now. All the kids that are in Honors Math 1, Algebra, Spanish, they've already kind of began that process of, you know, those classes are for high school credit, which goes into GPA and has high school implications. Last but not least, Mr. Mergel, what is your final advice for this year's eighth grade class? You've touched on some really awesome things. What is the final piece of advice that you have for them in their final year of preparation before coming over to Helena High?
There's a thing that I can't take credit for it. As you know, I'm a basketball coach, and I'm a huge guy on quotes and everything. And so there's a coach at the University of Virginia Tech that I follow a lot.
Buzz Williams?
Buzz Williams, absolutely.
He's awesome. Yeah.
And it's called the 7 Cardinal Rules to Live By. So I'm just going to go through those 7 cardinal rules with you. That every day when I come into my office, I use them on a daily basis just to remind myself of some things. But one, make peace with the past so it doesn't screw up your present. That's very, very important. Make peace with that past. We can't predict the past. We can't change the past, but we can look to, you know, change our present status and where we are in the future. So, you know, number 2, what others think of you is none of their business. I think we get wrapped up all the time as students in worrying about what other people think of us. It's really none of their business. You are your own individual. Number 3, time heals almost everything. So if you're going through tough times, there are going to be obstacles in the road. It's called perseverance. You know, it's called grit, getting through those things. Time will heal it. Number 4, don't compare your life to others. Your life is your own. Okay, we get caught up in that sometimes, of comparing our life to others. That sometimes it prevents us from our own happiness. Number 5, stop thinking too much. I know in my job I oftentimes think too much, and we think too much. You know, sometimes we overthink things, so stop thinking too much. Number 6, no one is in charge of your happiness except you. You're the only one in charge of that. You know, a lot of times we use our outside influence to predict our happiness, but you honestly are in charge of your own happiness. And finally, number 7, smile. You don't own all the world's problems. Sometimes we think we do, but it's very important to realize we don't. So, I hope you guys have a great school year, and you're off to a great start, and I look forward to meeting you next year.
Awesome. Mr. Murgle, thank you so much for doing this for us.
Appreciate it.
That brings us to this week's quote of the week, which is from none other than Sir Benjamin Franklin himself, who once said, "By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail." So much of life is preparing to be successful, and 8th grade academics is no different. If you want to be successful in high school, critically important, you prepare this year, same way you have from kindergarten through 7th grade. That brings us to last week's Jellybean Question of the Week winners, who are Alex Boyles, Morgan Bell, Noah Vinton, Lila Ackerman, and Caitlin Ruck. The answer last week was a bed. And for those of you that I haven't mentioned this to, I simply draw the first 5 correct answers each week, and that is who wins the Jellybean Question of the Week. Come see me after school for some jelly beans. Bobcats, this week's Jellybean Question of the Week is, this one's courtesy of Miss Kaufman. Shout out, Miss Kaufman. Can you name this object that I'm holding in my hand? This is an object used with computers to store files and data on. This next slide, I'm going to give you a little helpful hint. All right, since some of you have no clue what that is, let's play a little Jellybean Question of the Week game of Hangman. The correct letters are here. What I'm looking for is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-letter word followed by a 4-letter word. If you think you know, submit your answer into the Bob box no later than Friday. All right, Bobcats, let's go out there and make it a great week at the Helena Middle School.